Hey everyone, I'm Donna Druchunas, and this is a Procreate and Tech Tips session with Sequential Artists Workshop. And today we're going to look at how you can draw without using brushes. So let me switch to my iPad camera and spotlight it for everyone. And I'm going to go ahead and show you that. So I drew this. Now, I can't draw fancy things like some artists who do demos do really fast. So we're going to draw something really simple, which is a flower. And I actually used one brush on this, which was to put this texture on the leaf. But this texture and this texture that's in there, I did that all without using any brushes. So I'm going to show you this because it'll get you in practice with the selection tool. So I have a bunch of layers here, and I didn't start with a sketch or anything because it's just a silly flower. So we're just gonna I'm gonna turn this off, and then we're going to build this up from layers one at a time together on a blank canvas. So what I want you to do, first of all, we're just going to try some things out, is pick a color that you like just for us to play with. You can make sure that you have a color selected that you like. And we're going to go up here to this ribbon selection tool. And then down on the bottom, we're going to use freehand. And we're going to do something that we probably don't use a lot, which is make sure this color fill is checked so that it's blue, the color fill icon. So then what we're going to do is we're just going to, just for practice before we do the flower, we're just going to draw a selection. And it's not quite finished yet. When you draw a selection, you notice it starts with a gray dot. To finish the selection, you touch the gray dot again. Look at that, because I had color fill on, it automatically filled it with the color. And now I have made a mistake here. So there's a piece sticking out, and I don't want that. So I can go down here and say remove. My selection is still on. I can go like that, and it takes that out of the selection. And I can also add to my selection. All of that affects the color. I can even remove a part right in the middle. So I can do all this drawing with the selection tool. So I want you to just turn on color fill while you have the selection, and then try some other ones too. Try a rectangle. Whoops, it's not really doing what I thought because I had remove. You can combine the selection. So I can combine a rectangle with a freehand, and I can combine an ellipse with a freehand, and I can use add and remove. So these are things that we don't usually look at on the selection tool, which is the color fill, the add, and the remove. The other thing is, while your selection is active, so I still have all the little marching ants there. It's still making the selection. It has all the little marching ants around the edge. I can actually go in and decide I don't want this to be pink. I want it to be blue. And it changes it all to blue. So you can change your mind on the color while it's still selected and change it. You can then unselect it, and now it's just like something you drew. And I know this is not very beautiful, but so is everyone able to draw some kind of thing with the selection tool and color fill and get it to fill with the color? Yeah. Okay. But usually we have this off, color fill. And so whenever you go into selection, if you start using it, anytime you go into selection now, check if it's on or off before you do anything else, because you don't want to, accidentally color something because you left it on before. Okay, so I'm going to erase this layer, turn off my selection tool, and 3 fingers back and forth, erase the layer. And now I'm going to draw a flower. So we're going to draw the flower, and we're going to do it in layers, and we're going to add texture and highlights and shadows, and all without using the brush. So when my selection tool, freehand, and color fill is on, I'm just going to draw a bunch of flower petals. Now you can draw them all at once like that, or I can undo the whole thing. You can draw them one at a time. We're going to cover up the center of it. Whoops, I made a mistake, so I want to clean that up. You can, we're going to cover the center of it with the flower middle part. So don't worry if the center is not perfect. So I'm just going to make a crazy little flower. Oh, that one's messy too. I'm going to see if I can smooth that out a little. So that's the first layer I want you to make. Just some flower petals. And when you're done, you have to go on, turn the selection tool off by touching the ribbon again. It doesn't go away by itself with this. So if you want to have a more detailed flower, I didn't do this on mine, but if you want to have a flower with multiple rows of petals, you can make another layer, pick a different color, and with the selection tool, you can make other petals that kind of overlap and come in between the first group. So each of those is in a separate layer. We're just going to play with one layer for now. So I'm going to go to my original layer. So kind of give a wave or say okay when you've got your petals. Okay, got some petals. Ready to make the center?
Yeah.
Yep.
So add a new layer, and we're going to pick the color we want for our center. We'll go to the selection tool, color fill, and I'm going to use ellipse. You could use freehand again if you want, but I'm going to use ellipse, and I'm going to use ellipse to make a kind of circular shape in the middle of my flower. So that'll be the center of my flower. So the ellipse tool makes obviously circles and ellipses. If you want it to be use that, you could use freehand or ellipse depending how careful you want it. Then I'll turn off my selection tool. Then we're going to make another layer, and I want to bring this down to the bottom. I want my new layer down at the bottom, so I'll just drag it down, and we're going to put the leaves and a stem there. So we'll pick a green color and selection tool freehand and draw some leaves and stem on this layer. And you can draw it all in one piece or separate pieces. I did mine like this. The angle that I have my iPad at right now is not the best for me to draw, so my drawing is coming out a little crazier than it normally would. But that's how we get our basic shapes, just filled with solid color. And of course, you can be as careful as you want, and hold your iPad in the position that's comfortable for you and so forth. And sometimes I turn my canvas with my two fingers to move it around, pinch and zoom. Sometimes I turn that for a more comfortable angle instead of the whole iPad. So now we've got these shapes, and we're going to use the selection tool again with color fill off. And we're going to add shadows and highlights to this. So let's go to our center layer. that's on the top. And turn the selection tool on to freehand and color fill off. And then let's draw a selection kind of like that on the bottom part of the flower. Now, because I have color fill off, when I make my selection and click the little dot, the part that's not selected turns into this pattern of lines. And I have that really turned up really dark so that you can see it. But yours is probably not as, your lines probably are paler than that. Anyhow, so I have this selection here, and I want to make it a shadow. But you know, when you drew the selection, the line is really sharp, and I want my shadow to be blurred. So I'm going to go into the selection tool, and underneath the 4 choices, where same row is color filled, there's a thing called feather. So I'm going to click that and pull it up a little bit, maybe 5%. Okay. And then I'm going to go into, I have my selection now, I've done feathering, and I'm going to, while my selection is still active, so you can see, I still have the lines, the selection tool is still up. It's still up. I can go into the adjustments tool while the selection tool is still turned on, and I can say hue, saturation, and brightness. And now I can change the saturation, turn it down a little, turn the brightness down a little, and change the hue maybe to be a little bit more orange, because I was with the yellow. And I've done that. So now when I turn off both tools, you can see I have a shadow on my center. And you could do the same thing again for a highlight. So we could pick up any shape like that on the same layer, close the shape by touching the dot, go into feather, turn it up maybe to 5% or whatever you want, actually, and then turn on the hue, saturation, and brightness, and on the adjustments menu, hue, saturation, and brightness. And this time I'll turn the brightness up a little bit and maybe turn the saturation up a little bit. It's up to you. Just play around with it. You don't have to change these a lot to make them show up. And then when I turn my tools off, I have a little highlight there with my shadow. So we're going to do that to all the petals now. What I like to do is make like 1/2 of my petals darker. And you could have a light source and figure out how to do it. But since we're just practicing the tools, what I tend to do is the half of the petal that I think is closer to the bottom of my screen, I select. So you all done with your little flower center? Okay. So let's go to the petals and do some things to the petals. So make sure your petals layer is selected. And we'll go into the selection tool and freehand, make sure color fill is off. And now we can select parts of multiple petals. So in here on the center, we only selected one bit at a time. But now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to select the bottom half, or whatever half I want, because this petal doesn't have a bottom half, of each petal. So I'll be selecting all of these, half of the petal like that. Whoops.
Is this on a?
I accidentally turned my selection tool, so it deselected it. Okay, go ahead.
Is this on a new layer? I missed it.
No, that's okay. On the layer that you drew the flower on, we're going to be adding shadows right on that layer.
Okay, thank you.
No, you could, you could add shadows and textures on another layer, but we're going to do it right on this layer.
Okay.
So while the selection tool is on, you notice I made one selection for each petal. So I have all of those different ones. If your selection menu disappears, but your selection tool is still on, you can just, you can press the S again and it will come up. And now I'm going to feather all of these a little bit. So I'm just doing the same thing I did before, but with a whole bunch of things at once. Now they're all on the same layer. Now, you can do hue, saturation, and brightness again, or you could use curves. So let me show you how to use curves because we don't use it that much. I think we all know how to use hue, saturation, and brightness, but curves is a little different. If I want to just use this very simply, I can move it towards the middle up, and you see how it's making that lighter. And if I bring it towards the middle down, it makes everything darker. So because I want to make a shadow here on this, I'm going to bring it just in the middle down a little bit. When you open up curves, this section called gamma should be highlighted. Don't change that. Just bring the center down a tiny bit. And when you turn off your tools, you'll see that you got a nice little shadow. I think this is so much fun because this is like something that you can only do digitally. You can't do anything like this, you know, with paints and stuff. So now we're going to add a highlights to our petals. If you're all ready, everyone ready? Okay, so we're going to add highlights to our petals. Again, we're on the same layer of the flower petals. We're going to use the selection tool, freehand, and color fill is off. And this is going to kind of add a little bit of texture and highlight all at once. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a little shape like that on each petal. So I'm just going to kind of go three little points. I'm going to draw that on each petal. And I'm not being so careful with it. I'm just doing a freehand thing here. I'll show you how you can do this after if you have a drawing already, because we're just making this up out of our head, right? So now we're going to use hue, saturation, and brightness here. But I'm not going to change this, the saturation. I'm going to change the brightness a tiny bit, like maybe move it up to 53% from 50, but I'm going to change the hue. I'm actually going to change the color. While you're in there, you can go ahead and drag it far to the left and right, and you can see it changes it a lot. All of these sliders, when they say 50%, that's what you started with. So that means no change. And you can go up and down from there, and it makes changes. Obviously, saturation turns it up to make it more saturated. If you turn saturation all the way down, you get gray. Brightness, if you turn it all the way up, you get white. If you turn it all the way down, you get black. So 50 is where you started. So I'm going up to 53. And then hue, it changes the color. And depending where you start at, it goes towards red and towards blue. And so I'm going to move this to 54. So that may be 55. Okay, and then I'm going to turn off my things. And then I have, look, isn't that fun? I have these little highlights and texture on my flower.
Did you feather that set, Donna?
I did not feather that one. I did that
Okay.
with a sharp edge. You could feather it if you wanted to. I think it makes, like, to me, to not feather it, you know how flower petals have little kind of lines on them a lot of times? It's probably where little veins of water are going through them or something. But it's totally up to you what you feather and what you don't feather. So that's what's another thing that's cool about this. So when you got that done, I'm gonna show you one more thing that's really cool with the feathering. So let me know when you're ready. Somebody say yeah, hands, chat, whatever. Okay, got a thumbs up there. Smile from Carol, thumbs up. Okay, so let's look at our image and let's go into our layers and go all the way on the bottom and click background color. And it's probably white because that's what it defaults to. But let's pick another color for our background. I'm going to pick a kind of a yellow or something because my flower is blue. So I don't want to pick blue for my sky because it won't show up very much. Make my sky pink. Okay, that's not very good either. I'm going to make it a lot paler, but I don't want it to be white. How's that? That's better. Okay, so everyone change their background color to something else and then make a new layer. So I'm going to put some clouds on, and this is really fun. So we're going to make a new layer, and we're going to pick white for our color. Now, if you don't remember, you can go in the disk and double click in the upper left corner there to get pure white, or you can go in the classic mode and go all the way to the upper left corner to get pure white. You don't have to use pure white because they're clouds, they could be gray also, but I'm using pure white. So we're going to use the selection tool again. Make sure you make a new layer. So get a new layer and white. This is our cloud layer. We're going to pick freehand and we're going to turn color fill back on. So go ahead and draw some clouds. Remember, as you finish each cloud, touch the little dot at the beginning of it. So we're going to have a few clouds. Don't worry if the clouds are in front of your flower because we can move the layer when we get done with this. So we can draw 3 or 4 clouds in the background. They can be even off the edge of the page. And now we had color fill on. So we've got these clouds, but the edges are really sharp. And it looks like I'm stuck with them that way because the color fill is on, but I'm not. While color fill is on and I have the selection, I can go ahead and feather it and it blurs out the edges of it. Let me zoom in here. And I can turn it back off while I'm still having my selection on. So I can like play with it. And while you're dragging the slider, it'll show you a line, a white line that's on the outside of the feather. And then the dotted line is where your selection started. And so you can drag it as much as you want. When you let go, the white line disappears so you can kind of see what you've got. And now turn your selection off and you've got these nice blurry clouds. And of course, I drew mine in front of my flower, so I'm going to take that layer and drag it to the back. So there, it's in the background. You mean you can do this with anything. It doesn't have to be clouds. You know how they do that photo, how on the phone, if you put it in portrait mode, it does a depth of field and makes the background of your photo blurry. You can blur out anything you draw in the background to make it look like that. Okay. So let's do one more. Well, no, we don't need a new layer. Make sure you drag your clouds to the bottom of your layers list. And let's add the ground on here. And then we'll add some textures. So pick a color for your ground. You can have brown or green if you want it to be grassy, because we are going to add some textures to it. And we're going to do it with the selection tool again. We still have color fill on because we used it before. If you want a straight ground, you can just draw a rectangle, or you can draw a freehand ground, and that's kind of fun. And you notice when you go off the edge of the paper, it doesn't matter what you do. So like when I'm on my canvas, that's the actual shape. But if I'm outside of here, you know, that's not going to paint on anything because there's no paper there. So that's one. And let's just add 3 colors of green or brown, whatever you're doing in here. So I'm going to change my color to another brown, and I'm going to make kind of another selection inside the ground. And then maybe I'll pick my 3rd color. Whoops, no, I want to keep that one on the dark color. Then I'll pick my third color and I'll put a little bit of something on that side. So now I have a little bit of layers of dirt or hills in my picture. So let me know when you're ready, and we'll add some textures to the clouds and the ground and the leaves. I like to just like see things like this, because one of the things we get carried away with Procreate and is that we keep getting more and more brushes. I've got like so many brushes, it's ridiculous. And we're doing this whole thing with no brushes, you know? So, I mean, Procreate comes with a scroll to the bottom. I put my Procreate brushes on the bottom. Procreate comes with all these brushes. You really probably never need to buy any more brushes. That's okay, because we like to try different ones and so forth. But I just think it's really cool to know that you don't have to do everything with brushes. Okay, everyone have some ground there now? We'll stay on that layer. And nothing selected. That's okay. We're going to go into the magic wand for adjustments, and we're going to pick noise. It's about halfway down. I'm going to pick noise, and nothing happens right away. So there's stuff menu down here, and then noise has a little thing here with percentage. That percentage, how much noise you have, is controlled by moving your pencil back and forth. So we're on this layer with the ground and the clouds. So everything is going to happen to both of them. That's not really what I wanted. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to go into select. I'm going to turn off color fill and go to automatic. And then I'm just going to select my ground. And remember, with the selection tool on automatic, you can drag it to higher and lower percentage as well. So I'm going to drag it down till I just have my ground selected. And then I'm going to go back into the noise on. Got it? Okay. So I want to add some texture to my ground. And there's 3 things in noise, and these you just play with. You turn the percentage up and down, and if you go all the way up, it takes the color out. So I turn the percentage up a little, and then play with the scale and the octaves, the turbulence. You can pick a different one, and you can make textures just with this.
Okay, I missed where you got that
Yeah, okay.
bar at the
So
bottom.
let me go
Sorry.
out of here. I'm going to undo it. So I selected my ground, and then I went, and if it was, I selected my ground because I put my ground and my clouds on the same layer. And
okay.
I don't want to color fill now. I just want to add texture to the ground, not to the
Okay.
clouds. So I'm just going to use automatic and select my ground. And then I went into adjustments, which is the magic wand, and about halfway down is noise.
Okay, thank you.
And you have to drag up and down in the middle of the screen to get it to be more or less noise. And then you play with the other options to get different textures and effects. I mean, this is limited what it can do. It's not, you know, it can't do a million things. And then it has this other thing that you can play with as well for changing what you get. Turn off additive, turn it on, you get brighter colors, and there's single and multi-channels. If you use multi-channels, it adds a lot more color in there. If you use single channel, it keeps it like monochrome, just shades of the color you were using. So anyway.
So Donna, when you were showing it, you get really like different size
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
scale.
Okay, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Scale.
Scale, it turns from teeny dots to like
Oh,
things that yeah,
wow.
it looks like a metallic texture, right?
Wow, and water.
Yeah.
And
You go way up, it
green.
looks like Aaron Fitzgerald's
Yeah, you can just do like so
mine
many things. That
drawings.
one's ridges, then there's billows. They're all a little bit different.
Oh.
And one is called cloud. Yeah, so isn't that fun? So this is a
Trippy.
way you can add like different textures to things.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's limited in what it can do, but it's a quick way to add texture. I use add noise to stuff a lot. And then again,
Interesting.
once you have these things set, you can still drag your pencil on the main screen back and forth to make it more or less
Oh,
strong, I guess. So yeah, so put some texture on your ground. Now it looks like dirt or whatever. It's just not a plain. Isn't that fun?
It's cool.
yeah.
So now let's select the bottom part of our clouds. So we want to go to the freehand tool. And remember, clouds and dirt were on the same layer. So we'll select the bottom parts of our clouds and we'll do it on all of them. Just kind of in a fluffy way. I think I got all 4 of mine. And we'll feather it a little bit. 4 or 5%. And then we'll see if we can put some noise on this to make our clouds have a little shadow on them. So we'll go into the same thing. Hue, saturation, brightness, no color balance, but it's in that same adjustments menu, halfway down to noise. And we'll add a little bit of noise in that shadow. Yeah, just add a little bit of noise in there. And it's just going to make it little gray dots because it's white. So there's no color to work with really. Unless you go into the multi. No, see, there's still no color to work with because it was just white. You can play with the different things. If you turn additive on, it gets really dark. Turn additive off and it's lighter and see what you get. I think that's a little too strong on mine. So I'm going to undo it. And while I have my selection, you notice as I did undo, it did it in steps. So it undid the noise, but it left my selection there. It didn't go all the way back to before my selection. So I can feather my selection a lot more and go in and add a little bit of noise and see what that does. Yeah, there we go. I just got a little bit of a shadow in my cloud. You see that? And of course, you could use hue saturation on that as well to make it darker. All the things we did in the other parts, you could do to your clouds as well. And of course, we can use brushes too.
So I'm noticing that on my selection that I put on top of a cloud,
Mm-hmm.
and then I feathered it a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and then I turned on some noise,
Mm-hmm.
and it's feathering the edge of my selection that's on the outer side of the cloud, but on the line on that crosses the cloud, it didn't feather that. Let's see if yours looks like
Yeah, mine
yours.
feathered it.
Yours did both.
That was-
Okay, so I must have
yeah.
done something wrong. Okay, I'll just
That's weird.
rewind. Yep.
But the thing is, maybe you didn't feather it that much, Susan, because look what happens if you do that, right? And I
Mhm.
don't feather it. Remember, the edge of the cloud is already a soft
Feathered.
edge.
Right.
So if I don't feather my selection and I add noise, it will be feathered on the outside because the cloud was
Yep,
already feathered. But
Yep.
on the inside, it will make a hard line because you didn't actually feather the selection. So that's probably what happened. Or you only feathered it 1 or 2% and it still looks like too sharp of a line for what you want. So when you're done with that, let me know. I'm going to just show you then how you can use the selections and add some texture with brushes, because you can use brushes with selections as well. You don't have to be limited to the effects you can get with noise. You can play with some other things here. There's a half tone, and you can add noise and then blur it, or add a half tone, or you can just play with all of those things. You can add noise and then liquefy it. So this is just stuff to play with. If you're trying to create a texture in a selection, you can just play with any of it. So if I go back to my dirt here, where I added the noise, and I, turn on liquefy, I can do some other things in there to the dirt. I mean, I can, change these textures in more ways with different features. I can blur it a little bit. That creates the same thing as the feathering. So I can do that after the fact with blurring. So you can just, these things you should just, draw some silly stuff like this and play with the different features to see what kind of things you can come up with. Anything in that adjustments menu is fun to play with. All right, so last step on this is we'll go to the layer with our leaves, or one of the last steps anyway. We'll go to the layer with our leaves. And I want to change some of the texture on the leaves and some of the color on the leaves, but I don't want to draw outside the lines. I don't want to add any new stuff to this layer. I just want to change what's there inside the color. So I'm going to take my 2 fingers and swipe to the right and put on alpha lock. So you'll see that it gets little checkers in this icon here. That's showing that alpha lock's on. Now, if I do take a brush and draw on that layer, I can't draw outside the lines. So alpha lock, it forces you to color in the lines basically, and you just turn it on and off by 2 finger swiping on the layer, or you can click on the layer icon and find it in the menu, alpha lock. And if the checkers are showing, you have alpha lock on. Since we're doing selections, we'll do some more. I'm gonna pick a darker green. And again, I'm going to use the freehand selection, and I'm going to turn color fill on again. So remember on the petals, we selected it and we feathered it, and then we changed the hue and saturation to make the shadows. Another way to make shadows or to change part of it is to just pick a darker color. Make sure alpha lock is on, because we don't want to add, we only want to color in the lines. And now if I use the selection tool with color fill and draw a selection like that, didn't close it yet, watch what's going to happen. So I drew it so it covers half the leaf and then half is outside of the leaf. When I click the dot where I started to close the selection, it just made the 1/2 of the leaf darker. And I can, I can do that on the other leaf as well. And look at this too. If you're making your selections and you make a mistake as you're drawing, you can undo. So while you're making selections, don't make like a whole giant selection and not stop. Every time you stop and pick up your pen, that's an undo. So that's a level of undo. So watch this little line go back. 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. If I just did it like that as one and I do undo, I lose the whole selection at once rather than just part of it. So if I'm making big complicated selections, I make sure that let me use the selection tool. I make sure that I pick my brush up every now and then so that in case I have to undo it, I can just undo part of it.
Cool.
So
Would
that's,
never have guessed that.
yeah, right? You'd think it was just one undo, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now, well, I still have this selected. I'm going to pick another color. Whoops. Guess I'm not. You know why? Because I forgot that when you have color fill on and you pick another color, it fills the thing. So I'm going to have to stop. Gonna have to stop my selection. Whoops. Now I undid my whole thing. All right, let's do this again. Color fill on, darker green. 1, 2, missed there. I also like that if you miss, you can add to it like that. Okay. Now I'm done. Now I have that. Okay. I still have alpha lock on. So I can go into my brushes now and I can pick a brush. I'm going to go into the ones with Procreate and artistic. And I love some of these, Leatherwood, Aurora. These are really cool texture brushes. So I'm going to pick Aurora. And I'm going to pick a different shade of green. That's a little bit too brown, because my green was a little bit in the yellow thing. So I'm going to go more, like the disc works better for me, more into a bluer green. And I can add some texture to my leaves with the brush. And see, I can't go outside the lines because I have alpha lock on. And then for the stem, I might go into, I like the dry brush one in the painting. I like that for adding like fur lines or wood grain or something. So I can add some lines to my stem. So this last part's the only time we touched a brush in this whole process. So let me know when you're done messing around with that, and I'll show you a little bit of comics that are done with this technique and how I would use it if I had a pre-drawn comic, because this was on a blank canvas. So we didn't have a sketch or a thumbnail or anything. But a lot of this is useful that you could use in comics. I just can't draw a comic fast enough to demo for you guys, but I can draw a silly flower to demo. So give me a thumbs up if you're ready to go to the next thing. Okay. So, well, before I show you that, we'll just spend a minute on. Yeah, that's my character, right? That's Mimi. Before we go to Mimi, I just want to show you some comics that these techniques would work on. I don't know if the authors did them this way. This is Seance Tea Party by Ramuna Yee. And you can see that there's a lot of parts here where there's no outline on it. And she's just filled things with color.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's very possible that she used the selection tool to do this. A lot of comics artists use selection tool for coloring a lot. Here's a close-up in there, and you can see where she's added some texture on the edge of her shapes. But again, there's really no outlines except where she feels like it's like a little bit of a shadow. Yeah, no outlines on the speech balloons or anything. Yeah, so it's done in comics, you wouldn't think. This one is the Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill.
Yay.
Yeah, there's a little series. Well, you can see the same thing. There's a lot of just flat color in here where she may have done with selection. She adds a few lines where you want to see where it would be a shadow, or to set, where several pieces of the same item are the same color, and then you need some lines for that, some lines in the face. But most of the major shapes are not outlined. And again, if you zoom in on some of the panels, you can see where she added some texture for shadows and highlights and things like that. But again,
Do you think in those situations that she like did a sketch and then rather than going to inking, she would have
yes,
could have
I would
used a
say that,
selection tool on top of it? Yeah.
yes. And then I'll show you how I would do that. And I just want to show you one more because those are both like for kids, but this one is an adult comic, Aquatlantic, and it's done the same way. It's much more complicated in the style of the artwork and everything, but there's a lot of pages in this where there's no lines at all. There's just shapes and textures. So this could have been done all with the selection tool as well. I'm
And
totally
look at that sea, if you put that one back up, well, that
sorry.
sea
Yep.
green in the background, it was so clear that it was feathered, right? Or airbrushed, but
Really?
like on
Yeah.
the woman with the scroll up a little bit.
Oh,
See the
yes, here,
green? Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Yes, that could be
Oh,
a
yeah.
feathered selection, or you could use an airbrush
Uh-huh.
brush to do that. And if you had, and this might have been done, I can't tell. It's got some nice texture in it, which could be done digitally, or this could have been painted, but heck, that would be a
Uh,
blah, blah, blah ton of work to do analog. But yeah, so this is Aquatlantic. And if you zoom in on that, the same thing. You can see the same thing kind of there, Susan, where it would have been, but I am not sure. They could have used yeah, there's so many ways to do it, but it could be done the way that we're looking at it today. So, yeah, let's look at Mimi here. So Mimi's my new character that I'm working with, and I drew her on the iPad, but you could draw it on paper and take a photo or a scan and import it. The point of this is these lines are not going to be inked. This is just our guideline for coloring. So I would make it the top layer and turn the opacity down, and also turn the layer blend mode to multiply for my drawing. So that way I'm always going to see the drawing, but it's going to be light, and white will be gone. When you turn a black and white thing, or when you turn anything to multiply blend mode, anything that's white becomes completely invisible. So now I can go in, and here's what I would do. We've talked about flatting before in the past, and I would have taken my color. This is Mimi's color palette. And so she would be either this hot pink or this next one for her color. And I would take a smooth brush. I have a flatting brush, and you may have seen me do this before, where I would go in and take this really smooth brush, and then I would color her or outline her shapes with my brush, and then color fill them by dragging the color and dropping it into the shapes I colored. But we can do this with the selection tool as well. And this is where it's really handy to not just try to do it without picking your hand up at all. I'm going to outline all of her with the freehand tool and color fill on, except her hair. So I'm just going to go like this. And then see, I can pick up my hand. I can turn my iPad to make it so that's the right angle for me to draw all of these. I'm gonna color all of her.
Oh.
And I might not, whoops, see, I missed there. So I can undo, and it just goes back to where I picked up my hand at the nose. Also, I don't know if you know this, but if you want a straight segment, you don't have to draw it. So her neck is straight here, and I stopped there. I can pick up my pen and touch it there, and it adds a straight line right there. So I can go all around her. So for now I won't, because you got the idea. So I'll just go around her shoulders and neck and head. But I can take my time and go a little bit at a time. Get her ear. And then I'm going to go just kind of inside the hairline there. And then when I go back to the beginning and touch it, I've got a layer that, you know, if I had taken some more time now, it would be her whole body. That would be a flat color. And then I would make another layer above it. And, you know, I can go in with different colors and change her nose to a lighter color or just a highlight on her nose. So you can use all of this on a drawing the same as you could without having a drawing. Whoops, now I did it with a brush, but I wanted to do it with the selection tool. So a lot of people do color flatting for comics with the selection tool instead of with a brush. And so you can color, you know, as much or as little as you want this way. I tend to I might do a color fill like that. I tend to be painterly in my coloring on my comics. So a lot of times I have favorite brushes that I paint and get textures. But I could do all of these same things. I could turn color fill off, take a freehand selection on her face, and I can draw, select her cheeks, feather them a little. And then just like we did on the flower petals, I can go into hue, saturation, and brightness, and I can make her cheeks maybe a little more saturated and a little darker. So she's got rosy cheeks.
Oh,
And
wow.
you can do all of that stuff here. If I turn alpha lock on, I can make a sharp selection here. So maybe there's a shadow that goes on the edge of her chin and her face. So I can go into hue, saturation, brightness without feathering it and just make it a little bit darker. I'll overdo it here so it shows up. But see, now I put a little shadow on the edge of her face. And so you can do all of this. Yeah. And whoops, I really want our eyes white. So I can go in with the selection tool and outline her eyes. Whoops, I didn't close it after the first eye. And then outline her second eye. And I can use hue saturation. Remember I said if you drag it all the way up, the brightness, it's white. So now I've turned her eyes white. So you can use this for coloring. What's really cool about it is that if you had your lines and you used paint tools and things to color it, when you're done, you still need your lines because there's maybe gaps where there's no paint under the line, you didn't fill the whole shape. And you can use this for texture too. You know, I have her on alpha lock. I can take a brush instead of a painting brush. I can go back to those artistic or texture brushes there. And I can just add a little, you know, make her skin. She's a little old witch, so she's got, and she's me, and she's got rosacea. So, you know, so I can add that all on there. So you can do, you know, you can use the selection for this, or I used alpha lock on the selection I made before. But in addition, I could just make a new selection and say, I want her to have, you know, rosacea on her chin and her cheeks. And I want to put it on a new layer. And I can, you know, I don't have color fill on, and I can just add her rosacea in there with or without feathering it. And then I can, if I do it on a separate layer, then I have more control of the layer. I can use different layer blend modes on her zits, and you know, so if you do things on a different layer, you can, you know, have more control over it, but still using the selection tool for, you know, finding the areas to paint and add texture to. You know, a lot of times our ears are a little darker because they, or a little more red. Whoops. Remember to click the circle when you finish part of a selection so that it gets closed. You know, I can go into hue, saturation, and brightness, and I can darken her ears a little bit and maybe push the color a little different. Change the saturation. And now her ears are darker. So yeah, this is a great tool. I missed there. You see, I missed. And that's okay because I could go back in and do it again. Now I've undone the whole thing. But anyway, you get the idea. So all the things we did without lines, you can do them with lines. And what happens is when you take the lines off, you know, you end up with a complete drawing that doesn't need the lines.
Mm.
Well, let me just show you, if you don't do it that way. This one I painted, this is all digital, but I painted it. I did not use selections. Oh, that's not sorry, that's flattened, so you can't see the layers. Where do I have some more? Yeah, I'll just go into this one. So I did not use selections for this. I just painted, and it almost looks the same, right? I got highlights and shadows here and there. But if I turn off the line work, it's not a finished drawing because the lines cover up stuff. And I didn't color or create some things that I would need to have this as a finished drawing. But if you do it the selection tool way and just have the sketch there as a guideline, when you're done, you have a finished drawing that does not need the lines. So completely different way to do things. But I think it's totally fun. Yeah. So, and there's Mimi coming along. You can see she even looks much better than that other one, even though I didn't, you know, give her pupils in her eyes or anything yet, because it's the full shapes that I've colored. Yeah. So anyway, hope you guys had fun with that and that you maybe will use some of those techniques in your artwork, because
that was fun.
yeah, it's really cool, right? And then you can do some different things. And then Sally, you said you got those texture brushes, so you can use, oh, hey, Candy, I didn't see you pop in before. Yeah, you can use those pattern brushes you bought inside selections. And you may have done that already, but and try the pattern things inside a selection that's feathered, because then the pattern will fade out on the edge.
Nice.
So even though the pattern brush might have a hard edge, by using a feathered selection, you can make it have a soft edge. Yeah.
You know, it's so amazing to me. Almost every time in these sessions, Donna, is you like teach us stepwise technique. And I really appreciate the learn it step by step by step. And I'm like, yeah. And then you show us what you did in your comic. And I'm like, okay, I get it.
Right.
I mean, I get the opportunity and the power of the technique.
Yes. It's like I said, I can't draw a comic. I can't really draw a comic fast enough. I see artists that demonstrate software so much, and they're up there, they got a half an hour and they do like a masterpiece. I can't do that. I can demo a stupid flower enough to show you the steps.
Right.
But yes, you have to see it, how it's been used, how I might use it in a comic and how other artists have used it in comics, to kind of see. And that's a big step to take, because most of the stuff I learned for Procreate, I did not learn from comics artists, because there aren't that many showing you detailed stuff of how they do it. It's like, you know, they're mostly illustrators or picture book artists, or just, you know, Procreate teachers that are just showing you, you know, how to do landscapes or how to draw an ice cream cone or whatever. And yeah, but so you have to kind of think hard, well, how would I use that in a comic, right? Yeah.
Well, it seems like that I'm coming across more comics that don't have lines, right? That are full color shapes, but they have gradation in them. And so this, you know, it's not just like a circle with a red in it. Yeah. Interesting.
There are comics that are all flat color too.
Mhm.
No shading and stuff added in them.
Yeah.
Or the shading is very sharp, so there's no blurred lines, you know. There's so many styles, but yeah, but there are a lot of comics artists that do their flatting and also use selections for adding shadows and highlights and things rather than brushes, or they use brushes inside a selection so they can use a
Mhm.
combination.
Mhm.
Yeah, so useful thing to know and try out. So, well, thanks for coming, everyone.
Thanks for teaching
Donna.
us.
Thank you.
This
It
will
was
end up
great.
on the SAW YouTube channel
you.
if you want to watch it again, and I'll see you in Sawdust and other places during the week.
Great. Thank you.
Take care,
Thank
Donna.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.